The gospel is both the simplest and most complex thing that exists, because it is the simplest thing in that no other religion on planet Earth, no other God requires nothing of you other than your belief in him.
Yep.
There's every other religion on planet Earth, there's like this whole list of stuff.
Yeah.
And God's like, just come to me.
Welcome to the Hope in Real Life podcast with Jason Gore. Our team is passionate and committed to bringing you more hope in the everyday, real areas of your life. If this conversation and content is valuable for you, please do us a favor. Like, subscribe, and even share. You never know how valuable it could be to share a little bit of hope with someone else. Let's get the conversation started. Hope in Real Life family, this is part 2 of our interview with our guest, Molly Stillman. If you are ready for some more laughs and even more hope, let's jump right in. You said you inherited $250,000, okay? Admittedly, $250,000 today is not what it was, say, back in the early 2000s. But that's a significant amount of money. There's a lot of people out there that could be listening to this and think, man, if I only had $250,000, my life would be better. Seemingly, it actually created even more challenges for you. Can you just unpack that a little bit? Like, what would you say to somebody that would say, if I just had more money?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in short, prior to getting it, I had this mindset of like, well, I don't have money, so like if I just had more money, like it'll fix it. And then all of a sudden I got all this money and I was like, well, this will fix it. This will fix it. And so my coping mechanism became spending money.
Okay.
It was like, but it was not like yes, there were a couple of really dumb, just irresponsible large purchases. Like I may or may not have purchased a like brand new $40,000 Jeep Commander like the day after I got the money, because I was like, well, that's a pretty sweet car. And then I may or may not have like flown my college boyfriend and I first class to Rome for spring break. So like I did some stuff like that.
Okay,
but then, I did start a scholarship at my university in my mom's name. So like I did do some good with it. I gave some to my dad. I gave some to my sister. But then it was like death by a thousand cuts. It was just kind of like, nobody ever thought to say like, maybe you should create a budget. Like maybe you should put some in a Roth IRA. Like no one ever gave me any guidance. And I want to be super clear is that I don't blame anybody for my mistakes. Yeah. Like I own my mistakes. I was young and irresponsible. But there are times where, because when I got the check, like I had actual logistical questions. I was like, do I just like cash this bad boy? Like, what do I do?
Can I go to the
it?
gas station and cash this?
Right. Like I was like, I don't know what to do with this. I mean, it was a paper check. So,
just 10s and 20s, please.
Yeah, like I had no idea what to do. Like this, logistically, I had questions, and so I went to the bank because my dad was like, just take it down to the bank, and so I did. And the bank teller, like I remember, looked at me and like looked at the check, looked at me, looked at the check, looked at me, and was like, "Go see that guy." So I go to see Frank with the snap glasses at the table over there, and I sit down with Frank with the snap glasses in the bank, and he just like snaps his glasses together and he looks at the check and he looks at me and he's like, you should put some of this in some CDs and then put some in your savings account.
Of course,
and,
they wanted all
like
your
that.
money. That's what it was.
I mean, that's literally what it, so my whole thing has been like,
did you listen, I know Colin Powell. Okay.
Like, I know, excuse me.
I need better advice, please.
Right. But I mean, so part of me is like, dude, you couldn't have given me like maybe a little bit of a better suggestion.
No, you made that guy's bonus for the month. The
irony is my husband is now a financial advisor. So that's this like, God has a massive sense of humor. But yeah.
So is there something that you, by the way, when you said death by a thousand cuts, sorry, sweetheart, if my daughter listens to this,
I know.
I just envisioned my daughter getting $250,000.
Say goodbye, it's death by a thousand cuts. Flashback, finger me up. I'm sorry.
Karaoke, we got it. No, I just envisioned there being like 25,000 Stanley Cups in my daughter's bedroom.
Oh, Stanley Cups.
Yeah.
That's a different death by a thousand cuts. Sorry.
All right, so if you could go back and do something differently, or if you were given advice to somebody, you mentioned your husband's a financial planner.
Yeah.
hey, if somebody does come across some money, or even if they don't, like what practical advice, what would you give to them?
Practical advice. Let me tell you a funny story. So my husband is a financial advisor now. And so about a year ago, he had a guy come in to see him who is 21 years old. Both his parents were killed tragically. And he received a $1.5 million inheritance that he was not expecting on his 21st birthday. And so, but somebody referred him to my husband, and he comes in to meet my husband, and my husband says, let me tell you a story of what not to do. Wow. But what's really interesting is because of my story and my experience, and obviously it's not $1.5 million, and I didn't lose both parents, but like, because my husband has the context of receiving a lot of money at a young age, grieving, and all of the mess associated with all of that, he's been able to like really honestly walk alongside this kid and help him in a way that like he is going to be fine for the rest of his life financially. And it is like, in a lot of ways, I'm really thankful because it's like my husband is able to like help this guy learn from my mistakes. And so now I think he's 22 or 23 now, like the amount of money he has saved in a Roth, like he's got money that he's got in, a savings account, but he's now living in New York City and he's able to pursue like what he wants to do. And like he's set up financially for the rest of his life. Yeah. And so he is not going to be able to make the mistakes that I did. And so, practically speaking, the reality is that if somebody ever, and honestly, it doesn't matter what age you come into like that kind of money, or just even in general, like overall your finances, you get your first full-time job, or like I have a friend whose daughter is in high school and has her first job. She's, working at Starbucks, and she's blowing her paychecks every single time on Chick-fil-A and more Starbucks and all these things. And so it's a microcosm example of just like when we don't plan financially for the future, when you're not a good steward of a financial resource, then, that's all. Finances in general, like we are stewards of it. And whether it's a gift that God has given you, 1 Peter 4:10, or whether it's money or your home or your relationships, whatever gifts you've received, which everything we receive is a gift from God because every good and perfect gift comes from above. Yep. When we are stewards of our gifts, like we don't own it. A steward doesn't own it. A steward temporarily possesses something that somebody else owns. And then you have to give account for what you did with that thing when you were in possession of it. And so if God gives you something to steward, whether it's money or whatever, how are you stewarding it while you are in temporary possession of it? And so that's something that my husband tries to do with his clients, and that's something that I now try to do, in my life, and it's something I'm trying to pass down to my kids. And so just, in summary, is really just understanding that whatever you have, if it's money, financial resources, a home, whatever, it's not yours. And so you're to steward it. And so you think like, okay, well, what does the owner of this thing want me to do with it? Yeah. What does God want me to do with it?
Hope in Real Life family, I want to take a moment and let you know about a resource that we have for you for your own personal development, spiritual enrichment, and really a way for you to find a bit more hope in real life. We have a tool for you called the Hope in Real Life app. It offers things like parenting tips, financial resources, marriage insights. If you're looking for it, there's even Bible reading plans in there. And there's a community where you can even share prayer requests and know that someone is praying for you for whatever it is that you have going on in your life. It's available right now in the Apple App Store or in Google Play. You can search Hope in Real Life in both stores, or you can use the download link that is in the show notes. Remember, tomorrow can be better than today, and hope is possible even in real life. You were talking about how God works through different ways for different people, but for you, he actually worked through the idea of tithing. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So because especially anybody who has ever struggled financially, when you get into a position in which you are literally counting every single dollar that is in your bank account, and when you overdraft that account for the 100th time, and you see that that negative sign in the red, and I was at a point where, like I said, I was working 4 jobs. Like I didn't have enough money for groceries. Like I did not have enough money for food. I remember I got in a car accident and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to pay for this ticket. I don't know how I'm going to be able to pay for it. Like when you're at that point where you're standing in line at a food bank and you're like, I have a college degree and I'm standing in line at a food bank to try to get something to eat. Yeah. It's a really humbling moment. Right. And so my finances had held such a vice grip on me my entire life. Again, not coming from money, then going to college and just, working and then getting a lot of money and then losing it all very quickly. My wallet held this grip around my heart. And I believe that God speaks to us through the avenues that Satan wants to have a vice grip on us. And so for some people, again, it might be your sexuality, it might be your status or your marriage. I mean, your parenting, whatever it is. Like Satan is going to try to get in there through the way that he knows is your weakest point. And so for me, like when I started attending church, within a couple of weeks, I had heard a sermon on tithing, and I'd never heard that term before. I had no idea what tithing was. And so this concept of giving my first fruits to God, giving 10% of my income back to God, because remember, we're stewards of it. It was his first.
For our listeners that might not know, tithe literally means a tenth.
A tenth, right. And so that was an entirely foreign concept for me. And pretty quickly, I felt this conviction. And that, again, what I now know to be the voice of the Holy Spirit saying, like, you need to do this. Yeah. But remember, I had no money. Yeah. And so, like, the idea of giving 10% of my income to God was like, well, this doesn't make actual financial sense. Yeah. And so in December of 2010, was the very first time that I sat down with John. Again, we were dating, and at this point we were discussing marriage, but I knew that I had not told him everything about my story. He did not know that I was in debt. He did not know about my inheritance. He did not know any of it. Meanwhile, again, he'd missed like 5 Sundays of church his entire life. He bought his first house when he was like 23. He'd tithed his whole life. Like he was in no debt. And here I was like a mess. And so I said, I know we're talking about marriage, but I need you to know all of my stuff, like all my junk. And I was certain this dude was going to be like, we'll see ya, bye. But I shared that with him because I said, I think God is calling me to tithe. And I don't know how I'm going to do this. And instead of judging me or like, running away, he, and especially if you know John, you would know that this is him. He opened up his laptop and he opened up an Excel spreadsheet because the guy loves a spreadsheet. And he was like, we're going to figure this out. I'm going to help you figure this out. And so we looked at my finances and we realized that if I was to tithe 10% of my income, I would not have any money for either groceries or groceries or gas. And so it was going to be one or the other. I could get to work or I could eat. And he said, I can tell this is something you feel really called to. So if you commit to this, if you commit to the tithe, I'll buy your food for a couple of months. I'll buy your groceries. It wasn't going to be like filet. It was going to be like deli turkey meat and some boxed mac and cheese. But he was going to make sure I didn't starve. And I mean, which I just thought was incredibly generous. And so he did that. And so I wrote that first check. And every paycheck I got, I would get my physical checkbook out. Kids, I don't know if you know, there's these things are called checks.
They're paper.
And then you had your the book that then you had to balance your checkbook. It was the whole thing. So
yes,
I would.
I'm going to tell you a story.
I'm going to tell you a story, and then I'm going to take my Metamucil. Sorry. Okay, so
when I was your age, we used to have to.
Back when I was your age. Okay. I don't know why all of a sudden I'm like an old. I don't know where that voice came from. Back when I was your age. So anyway, I wrote a physical check, and but truly,
I have no idea what we're going to title this episode.
I know. I'm so sorry.
No, this is great.
Blame Bradford Mitchell.
Yeah.
For all of this.
Laughs in real life with Molly Stillman.
But I started tithing, but within and let me say this before I share the rest of this. is I am incredibly sensitive to, I don't ever subscribe to, nor do I preach or do I share or believe in a prosperity gospel of any kind. Right. So I am not sitting here telling you that if you decide to start tithing your 10% of your money and your like blessings are going to flow down from heaven, that is not what I am saying. And so I want to be really super clear about that. So I say that with that sensitivity because I know that has been abused by a lot of people for years. And so there are people that are sensitive to that and can be triggered by that. And so I don't want to say that I preach that message. That is not what I'm doing. What I am sharing is that this was an act of obedience on my part and trust and loosening, again, that vice grip that my wallet had around my heart. You know, a lot of people, when they come to faith in Christ, I mean, everybody, when you come to faith in Christ, it's that churchy word of sanctification. Like it's a slow, very painful process of turning over your heart, your mind, your body, your soul, your wallet, all of it over to God and trust and surrender. And usually the wallet's the last one. Yep. It's usually the last one. For me, God knew that was the thing that held the greatest grip on my heart, mind, body, and soul. And so through that, I started to, again, writing that paper check. That was me taking an act of obedience in trusting that he was going to provide. And his way of pointing me in the right direction was within a month, I got a bonus at work that was to the penny, 10% of my income. Wow. Then the next month, I got a raise that was to the penny, an additional 10% of my income.
Come on, somebody.
And so like literally every single month, and my husband, like to this day, he's like, it's the craziest thing I've ever seen, is every single month, my budget literally to the penny evened out. Wow. Every single month, my expenses, my bills, everything. And God just, he never provided too much. And he didn't provide not enough. He provided exactly what I needed. And he knew what to trust me with. And so that was where it all began for me. And then a year after I started tithing, I received a job offer for a job I did not apply for, but from a company that was creating a job because they wanted to hire me. And the salary was exactly double what I'd been making a year before. And it was to the day that I'd written that first check. Wow. And it was this moment of like God just looking at me and saying like, I told you to trust me. Yeah. And I told you that I was going to provide. Yeah. Again, it was never too much and it was never too little. It was exactly what I needed. But at the same time, it wasn't just like providing in a financial way. It was, I was able to restore broken relationships. I was able to make amends with some of the people that I had hurt. And so it was a beginning of process of a restoration from what was broken to what could be. And it's not like I gave my life over to Christ and started tithing and everything was easy. I mean, I mentioned at the beginning of the show, like I have 2 babies in heaven. Yeah. Like that was the worst. It's not like life is easy. But life with God is a whole lot better than life without him when I'm trying to do stuff on my own.
Yeah. And that's good. I think we could sit in that do a whole episode just on what happens when we're obedient. And again, to your point, it's not a prosperity thing, but when God calls us into things, he wants us to see he is faithful.
Yeah.
Let's press pause on that just for a moment. We talked a little bit about your book. Also a podcaster. We're talking, so you have a podcast now that's 8 years old.
Yeah,
right?
It turns 8 this month is September.
That's older than a toddler.
I know.
That's impressive, so well done there. Podcast, Can I Laugh on Your Shoulder? What was it that led you to want to, you're essentially creating, right?
Yeah.
As a writer, as a podcaster. Yeah. Talk a little bit about like what is it inside of you that makes you want to have that as a part of your life?
Yeah. Well, I used to do comedy, sketch, and improv. I've always loved to create.
Shocking that you've always done comedy.
I know. It was really shocking. Yeah. But so I was a creative writing major in college, and I've actually written online in some form or fashion for over 20 years. Okay. And that was just, I had a professor in college who said the only way to get better at writing is just to write. And so I did. And so I started with a blog, and I'm really glad that the archive feature exists so you can't see some of that really bad early writing. And so I just loved to create. And then I got that job working in radio, and I loved working in radio and did a lot of voiceover work and on-air work. And that was just really fun. But then I didn't work at the radio station anymore. And podcasting had kind of become this thing that people were doing. And I was interested in it. And after kind of mulling around with the idea for a couple of years, my husband finally said, like, oh my goodness, would you stop talking about it and just do it? And so I did. And so I launched it in the fall of 2016. And 410 episodes later, I'm still every Wednesday it comes out. But I get to sit down with, people that not Colin Powell, may he rest in peace. But I get to sit down with just incredible like speakers and authors and, producers and content creators and just hear how they're using, it's kind of the undergirding of it all is 1 Peter 4:10 is like each of us has received a gift and we're to use that gift to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. And so how are people stewarding their gifts in a way to serve others and make their communities and families and friendships better than they found them? And it's called Can I Laugh on Your Shoulder? Obviously, because it's this idea of like, life is both beautiful and hard. And so it's a play on the Can I Cry on Your Shoulder of just like, we're going to have hard conversations and we're going to maybe cry a little bit and we're also going to laugh and just get to know one another as humans. And it's really fun. I love it.
So I'm hearing this though, mom, wife, podcaster, author. How do you find time? Like, where does all this?
Now I'm going to seminary.
That's right. Now you're going to seminary.
Why?
Let's say,
Why
you know
did
what?
I do this
Not
to
enough.
myself?
One more thing.
Why did I do this to myself? I don't know. If I'm being totally honest. Well, I will say that God has done a lot of pruning. I realize that's another churchy word that we see throughout the Bible, but having lived on a farm and we have a garden and fruit trees, like pruning is essential to producing good fruit. And God has pruned a lot. The pandemic pruned a lot in my life. That's a whole another conversation for another day where he stripped a lot away. And I had to like really in the last 4 years ask myself, what do I prioritize in my life? And I realized that for a while I was prioritizing, I think, in a different way, but like success. And I had the dream of getting the book deal and all of that. And then I realized that like time is fleeting and the most important people in my life are my husband and my children. And I don't want my kids to look back and say, we never saw mom because all she did was travel, or we never saw, mom and dad happy together. And I want my kids to like be grossed out by their parents because we smooch in front of them so much. And I want, my kids know like how much mom and dad love each other. And my kids know that they are my number one priority outside of their dad. And that is like our family unit is the most important thing to me. And so that takes precedence over everything else. And so I've had to learn some really hard time management skills and then also have conversations with my kids where I can say things like, all right, we've spent a lot of time together, children. I love you so much. Now mommy needs an hour, so sometimes there is a balance. But I never want to like make my husband or my children feel like they come second to anything else that I do. And so I do not ace this. So I just want to like be super clear about that. I am not like nailing this, especially with now I'm starting seminary. So who knows what that's going to look like.
Your book, If I Don't Laugh, I'll Cry. What do you, when you wrote that, what's the heart coming out of that? What do you want people to walk away from that book? Yeah. Carrying with them?
I love that you asked that question because, I knew that, it's a Christian publisher. So like, I knew that Christians would pick it up. I want Christians to read it. I would love for you to buy my book. Please do. Support your local author.
And we will put a link to it in the show notes and everything.
You can get wherever books are sold. I obviously like, I really believe anybody can listen to it. Men, women, I don't think that it's really like meant for just women in their 30s. Like I've had 75-year-old men read it who love it, and I've had high school seniors read it who love it. So I think that something appeals to everybody. But I can tell you that there were 3 very specific people that I had in mind while I wrote it. And I pictured them the entire time I wrote it. I won't say who they are because I know them personally. But they are 3 people in my life who I love very, very dearly. And all 3 of them do not know the Lord. And I pictured them specifically because they know that I know the Lord. And I've had a lot of conversations with them about it. But these are 3 people who are carrying really heavy things, who are, I'm watching just try to get through the difficulty of life on their own. And they just desperately need Jesus.
Yeah.
Desperately. But I'm sure that there are people watching or listening who have that person in your life who doesn't know the Lord. And you have like tried to share the gospel with them in some way, shape, or form, but sometimes the hardest people to witness to are the ones that are closest to us. Yep. And so I wrote this in mind in such a way that I tell the story, and the book really 85% of it is like not a testimony. It's not like churchy at all. Like I wrote it in such a way that I invite you in, and I earn the right through laughter, through tears, through baring my soul and sharing my story as honestly as I can, to, by the end of the book, slap you in the face with the gospel.
Yeah, right.
And I use that term very specifically because I said to my editor when I was writing it, I said, I want to get to the point where by the end of the book, you have been punched in the face with the gospel, so that you close that book and there is no way that you can close that book and you have not heard that there is hope to be found in Jesus. Because I knew that those 3 people are going to read the book because they're my friends, and I know that they would read it. And I know, again, I don't have like these expectations. Like God is more concerned with my obedience than my results.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
He's more concerned with my obedience. And my whole thing is, did they close the book and did they go, Jesus maybe isn't like so crazy. And I don't know if I'm like watering or planting.
Yeah.
It's not my job to save them. That's God's business.
Yeah.
But like, was I obedient in how I shared the gospel, and was it just a little seed?
Yeah.
Again, I don't have these like Delulu. I'm not Delulu, as the kids say, to think that, no cap. I'm not Delulu.
There will be a vocab test after this episode.
Yeah, I know. I'm not, I'm not, Delulu enough to think that they're going to close the book and like surrender their life to Christ right there. I did not expect that to happen. But I wanted people who had never heard the gospel before to hear it in a way that was disarming. Yeah. And so that was my goal in it. And I'll tell you, like, based on Amazon and Goodreads, people either love that approach or they do not. Their reviews. But I will say overall, majority have said, I've even seen reviews that say like, I'm not a Christian, but I really appreciated the way that she shared her faith.
Yeah. Hope in Real Life family, I want to pause for a moment and let you know about an opportunity that I believe can help you find a bit more hope in everyday life. Listen, I know a lot of our viewers probably aren't a part of a church, or maybe you gave up on the church a long time ago. And believe me, possibly for good reason. I understand. But I don't want you to miss out on the hope that you can actually experience by journeying alongside of a group of people that really are seeking God's best for their lives. If you are the least bit curious, we try to make this as simple for you as we possibly can. Wherever it is that you digest digital content, podcasts, you can go to the podcast store. You can check it out on YouTube and just search Hope Community Church. You'll be able to find our messages there and check those out. Or if you actually want to tune in during a service time, you can go to gethope.tv at 4:15 or 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or you can tune in at 9:30 or 11:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, that's at gethope.tv. We hope that you'll take a chance with us and experience what it is God has for you in your life. You're going to find practical messages that will help you find hope in the everyday moments of your life. Hope you'll check it out. Well, Molly, I say this. So we just met today.
Yeah, we did.
Before we came.
We did. Hi, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
We've shared a lot. We talked about Colin.
We have. We did.
Our mutual friend.
Our mutual friend. Yeah. I mean,
Colin.
who would have known such a small world that we run such a small circles together?
We both know Colin.
Growing up, Gosh. So what I was going to say, sincerely, you were certainly one of the funniest. but also one of the most inspiring people I think we've ever had on the show. But you said you, through laughter and through bearing your soul, which you've done a bit of both of those, that you wanted that to set you up with an opportunity to be able to share the gospel.
Yeah.
And I think your words were smack them in the face, punch them in the mouth, one of the two.
Punch them in the face, punch them in the mouth. Yeah.
I think you've done that on this show. I think
you.
you've bared your soul. I think we've laughed probably more than was anticipated. So if somebody else was listening right now, like you've kind of got to set up, what is it that you would want them to hear about where they can find hope?
Man, it is the gospel is both the simplest and most complex thing that exists, because it is the simplest thing in that no other religion on planet Earth, no other God requires nothing of you other than your belief in him.
Yep.
There's every other religion on planet Earth, there's like this whole list of stuff.
Yeah.
And God's like, just come to me.
Yeah, I was teaching this past week on the life of Abraham, and it says that Abraham believed, and so God credited it to him as righteousness, on his belief, not on his actions, not what he did or didn't do, but on his belief. But I asked you a question and then interrupted for no reason at all.
No, I
so
loved
continue.
it. I loved it. No, it's great, and I can talk about this all day. I mean, I really, it's the simplest and it's the most complex thing, because God requires nothing of us other than our belief in him and our trust in him and our love for him. That's it. But it's also like this incredibly complex thing where we think about the fact that, like, wait a second, the God of the universe, the creator of all things, this thing that we can't see or touch, like, wait a second, he's a triune God. Wait a second, there's 3 in 1, huh? And he sent his son on earth like a real person, God in flesh, and to live like a perfect life, and to then die on a cross for me, for you, for literally everyone. Right. And then wait a second, then he came back from the dead 3. Like, that is an incredibly like mind-bending thing. Yeah. And yet
we could do a mini series, The Chosen or something, where you
don't even get me started on The Chosen. Oh no. Yes. It is worth it every second of every day that I wake up and there is breath in my lungs and I go, thank you, Lord, for another day. Yeah. And I go to bed at night and I say, thank you, Lord, for this day. And even in the midst of the hard and the challenging, and I love it. You were talking about, you were teaching on Abraham this last week, and I preached at my church last weekend actually on Paul, when Paul's on trial before Felix and Festus and Agrippa, and he's like in the dark, and it's like, wait, why would God let Paul, like, why would he sit in prison for this long? And Paul's then preaching the gospel in front of Felix and Drusilla and Festus and Agrippa, and like none of them ever came to faith. So like, did Paul fail? But like, no, he didn't fail. He was obedient to what God had him do. And yet, like, that is really difficult when we are obedient, and sometimes we don't see the results. We don't see the thing that we are hoping, and we're like, wait a second, God, like, you told me to do this thing, and like, what? But it's like, it's those little steps of faith and obedience that grow us. And I look at the life of somebody like Paul, who just like, he turned it all around, and just from, to the end, he fought the good fight, and he finished the race, and he carried it on to completion. And like, he just was obedient, and then he was beheaded. Like, it's not fun to think about. My family and I, we traveled to Rome, actually in July, and I went to the Basilica of St. Paul, where Paul is buried. And I stood there at the tomb of Paul, and I started sobbing, and I did not expect this. And my daughter looks at me, she's like, Mom, are you okay? And I was like, I'm suddenly like, Fairy, I have a lot of feelings right now. And I think I was pondering on it, and I was like looking at Paul's tomb, and I was like, this is where Paul is buried. Like, this is Paul. Yeah. And he, like, we exist. Like, we're here because Paul preached to the Gentiles. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's Paul. But also, like, he was real, and he was human, and he was broken just like me, but he was obedient until the end. And look at the legacy that he left, because he allowed God to work through him. And so that was a really long answer to your question, and I'm very sorry. But really it's taking that next right step in faith and obedience and leaving the results up to God, not ourselves. Because when we try to create our own results, like it's a mess. But man, God is good.
Okay. So here's what I know. You got a book. If I don't laugh, I'll cry. Mm-hmm. Podcast, Can I Laugh on Your Shoulder?
Yeah.
If our listeners are like, man, how in the world do I find a way to digest more of what Molly Stillman's doing, to stay in touch with what she's doing, what's the best way for them to track you down, to follow you?
The quickest way,
outside of buying the book.
Yes, please buy the book. Again, support your local author. The quickest way would be on the Instagram.
Okay.
I'm at Still Being Molly on Instagram, and I hang out there a lot. And then my podcast, obviously, it comes out every Wednesday. Can I Laugh on Your Shoulder, wherever you get your podcasts. And I'm not on the TikTok. I feel a little old. I'm trying to. People tell me I should be on the TikTok, but I'm not on.
You feel old. Every time you were talking about, and I was in high school here, and then I did this here. I'm like, I was past high school then.
It's fine. I mean, I'm, again, what was I? I was writing paper checks. Okay, right. So I'm taking my Metamucil. Actually, the other day, funny quick digression. I got some my shipment of magnesium in the mail, and I opened up my package, and I was like, ooh, my magnesium, and my 11-year-old looked at me and went, wow, Mom, you're old. And she was like, you're excited about magnesium. Yeah. And I was like, yes, I am. It's great for sleep and digestion.
It is. It certainly is. And
you're welcome. You can cut this. I, too,
lament the day that I run out of magnesium and realize I haven't ordered any more on Amazon because I don't sleep as well.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
But I also remember, right now, I am remembering seeing my grandmother with a pill box. Mm-hmm. Thinking, man, how old do you have to be before you have to start taking all these pills every day? Mm-hmm. And that right now, the only thing different from me and my grandma in that category is I don't use a pill box.
Yeah.
But I have
a story about that I won't tell on this, but yeah.
Maybe for the next episode. Okay. Hope in Real Life family. It's been a while. We're going to sign off.
I'm so sorry.
We're clearly going to have Molly back on the show. Buy the book. Check out the podcast. Follow her on the Instagram. I forgot to ask this question. Dadgummit, before we sign off. I like to ask every guest one question. Over the next 5 years of your life, what are you the most hopeful for right now?
Right now, I am the most hopeful to just watch my children. This maybe sounds cliche, but it's to watch my children continue to grow into the great, incredible kids that they are, that God is shaping them to be. My daughter is 11, and she has a calling on her life by God. And I realize that maybe a lot of parents say that, but I see something really unique in her, and I can't wait to see what God does. And my wild and crazy basketball obsessed son, like, I don't know what God's going to do through that crazy redheaded boy, but he's going to do something. And it's the joy of my life to get to watch it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, Hope in Real Life family, if there's somebody in your life, man, gosh, we covered so much. If there's someone in your life that maybe they're just thinking, I need a break. I need the cash. I got to figure out where that next sum of money is going to come from, because that's going to make some things easier. Man, share this with them. I've sat here and listened to someone, like, if you think somebody's like right on the edge and just needs a little bit more push, a little bit more inspiration to take a big step of faith because of what God's calling them into, man, share this content with them. You never know the difference you can make by taking a few seconds to offer a little bit of hope to somebody right where they are. Molly, thank you again
for
being on the show. Absolutely. Hope in Real Life family. We'll see you next time. Let's keep sharing some hope. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Hope in Real Life podcast. If this content was valuable for you, don't forget, like, subscribe, share. You never know how important it could be to bring a little hope into someone else's life. There's even a place here for you to comment. We would love to hear from you and hear your feedback. Until next time, let's keep sharing hope.